The rain came down in sheets that November afternoon, the kind of cold Pennsylvania rain that soaks through cheap coats and cheaper shoes and reminds you exactly where you stand in the world. Isabel Hargrove stood at the edge of the cracked parking lot, one hand pressed against the chain-link fence, and stared at the building that was about to become either her salvation or the final proof that she had never been meant for anything better than this. The Riverbend Motel sat 3 miles behind her. Room 14, B. $240 a week for a space with 2 double beds. A bathroom with cracked tile, a mini fridge that leaked, and a microwave that only worked on the lowest setting. That motel room was not a home. Everyone in it knew it was not a home, but it was where they lived. Belle was 31 years old. She had a 7-year-old daughter named Nora, waiting for her back at that motel, watching cartoons with Mrs. Patterson from 2 doors down. She had $83 left in her checking account after the auction fees. She had a Honda Civic with a transmission that was starting to slip and a check engine light that had been on since August. She had a stack of medical bills from Nora's asthma attack in September that came to a little over $9,000. She had an eviction on her record from the apartment in Harrisburg that she and Daniel had shared before he disappeared with a woman named Crystal, and most of the money in their joint account 4 months ago. She had a high school diploma and 2 years of community college and a resume full of waitressing jobs and retail jobs, and one short stint as a bank teller that had ended when the bank closed the branch. And she had a warehouse. She had a warehouse that her older brother Callum had told her in no uncertain terms was going to be the stupidest thing she ever did. The warehouse was 4 stories of old red brick, the kind they don't build anymore, with tall arched windows that had been boarded over so long ago. The plywood itself had gone soft and black with rot. A faded sign above the loading dock still read, Whitman and Sons Textile Company, in letters that must have been proud once back when this part of Lancaster County still made things still meant something. Now the sign hung crooked. Now the loading bay doors sagged on their rails. Now the whole structure leaned slightly to the north as though it were tired of standing up and was thinking about giving in. $150. That was what she had paid for it. $150 at the county tax auction on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks ago. She had raised her little paper paddle with a hand that would not stop shaking. The auctioneer had looked at her the way people had been looking at her for most of her adult life, with a mixture of pity and mild amusement, and he had said, "Sold to the young lady in the back." Belle had felt her whole face go hot. She had walked up to sign the papers knowing full well that what she had just bought was almost certainly going to destroy her. But when the county clerk handed her the deed in a manila envelope, there had been something else inside. A smaller envelope, cream-colored paper yellowed with age. Her name was not on it. Just 3 words in elegant cursive to the finder. 2. Belle had opened it standing right there at the folding table, while other bidders shuffled past. Inside, a single piece of stationery, handwritten in the same careful script. To the brave soul who claims this property, look where the river ran beneath. What I hid belongs to no one but the finder now. Do not let it go to waste. It was signed with initials. H. W. Henry Whitman. It had to be. The man who had owned the mill. The man who had died there 40 years ago. Belle had folded the note carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. She had not shown it to anyone, not the clerk, not the other bidders, not Callum when he called that evening, his voice tight with frustration. "You're out of your mind, Belle." Callum had said it standing in his own cramped kitchen in Reading, where he worked 60-hour weeks at a warehouse distribution center, and came home to a wife who was tired and 2 kids who needed braces they couldn't afford. "You are genuinely, legitimately out of your mind. That place has been sitting empty for 30 years. 30 years. The roof is gone. The pipes are gone. The copper is gone. There's probably asbestos in the walls, and lead in the paint, and God knows what else in the soil. And you want to what? Fix it up with what money? With what tools? With what time? You work double shifts at the diner, and you've got a little girl who needs you, and you're going to... what? Become a contractor. I just need something, Cal." Belle had said it so quietly she wasn't sure he heard her. "I just need something that's mine. I just need something I can point to and say, this is mine. Nobody can take this from me. Honey." His voice had softened in a way that had somehow been worse than the anger. "Honey, they can take anything from you. That's the whole lesson. That's what Mom tried to teach us." But Mom had been wrong about a lot of things, Belle thought, now standing in the rain outside the fence. Mom had been wrong about Daniel. Mom had been wrong about community college being a waste of time. Mom had been wrong about God and about luck and about the way the world was supposed to work. Mom had died 2 years ago in a rented room in Reading with nothing to her name but a television and a photo album. Belle had been the one to clean out that room. She had stood there looking at the sum total of her mother's 64 years on Earth, and she had sworn to herself that Nora would never have to do that for her. Nora would never stand in a rented room sorting through garbage bags of nothing. Nora would have something. Nora would inherit something. Nora would look at her mother's life and see that it had amounted to something, even if it was only 4 walls and a roof that her mother had fought for with her bare hands. The wind picked up and drove the rain sideways into her face. Belle pulled the hood of her coat tighter and pushed through the gap in the fence where the chain had long since been cut by vandals or scrappers or kids. The gravel of the parking lot crunched under her boots. Weeds had grown up through every crack, tall enough now that they brushed her thighs when she walked. The front office door was padlocked, but she had the key. The county had given her a key at the auction, a heavy brass thing on a paper tag, and the tag had the address written in faded pen. Belle had held that key in her hand on the drive home, and she had felt something she had not felt in a long, long time. Not quite hope, something leaner than hope, something more like a dare. The padlock resisted at first, the tumblers stiff with rust, but it gave with a grinding click and fell open in her hand. Belle pushed the door. It stuck, scraped against warped linoleum, then yielded. She stepped out of the rain and into the warehouse for the first time as its owner. The smell hit her first. Mildew. Decades of it. That wet black smell of books left in a flooded basement. And under that, something older. Something like machine oil and cotton dust, and men who had worked hard and sweated into their clothes and come home to families that were waiting for them. The smell of the last century. The smell of work that had stopped. Belle stood in what had once been the front office and let her eyes adjust. Gray daylight filtered in through the filthy windows and showed her a room that had been picked over and left for dead. A metal desk overturned in one corner, its drawers missing. A single wooden chair sat in the middle of the floor, as if someone had been sitting in it when they decided to leave and had just stood up and walked away. Calendars on the wall, sun-faded and water-stained, showed a month and year she couldn't quite read. The floor was layered with paper. Not trash exactly. Documents, invoices, shipping manifests, decades of business correspondence scattered across the linoleum like leaves after a storm. Belle knelt and picked up one of the papers. A bill of lading dated September 1978. Whitman and Sons had shipped 400 yards of cotton duck canvas to a buyer in Philadelphia. The signature at the bottom was in a neat, slanted hand. H. Whitman, it read. She set the paper down gently, the way you set something down on a grave. The main warehouse floor opened up behind the office. When Belle stepped through the inner door, the scale of the place took her breath away. It was enormous. A cathedral of brick and steel and broken promises. The ceiling soared 30 feet overhead, supported by iron columns riveted in place by hands that had been dust for half a century. Great industrial sewing tables still stood in rows down the center of the floor, their machines long since stripped for parts. Bolts of fabric, hundreds of them, lay rotting against the walls, where they had been abandoned, their colors bleeding into the concrete. Pigeons fluttered in the high rafters. A hole in the roof, maybe 6 feet across, let the rain fall in a steady gray column down through the air and onto the floor, where it had carved out a small dark pond in the concrete. Her breath clouded. It was colder inside than out. Somehow colder. Callum was right, of course. No sane person would have done what she had done. No sane person looks at a building like this and sees anything but a money pit, a liability, a lawsuit waiting to happen. But Belle walked the length of the warehouse floor anyway, stepping carefully over fallen beams and puddles and tangles of electrical wire. She was taking inventory, though she didn't quite have a plan yet for what the inventory would tell her. At the far end of the building, opposite the loading dock, a concrete ramp led down to a lower level, a basement. Belle had not known there was a basement. The auction listing had mentioned only the 4-story structure and the parking lot. It had said nothing about what was below. She went to the top of the ramp and peered down. The darkness below was complete. The smell that rose up from it was worse than the smell on the main floor. Thicker, more organic, like something had died down there and become the foundation of something else. Belle pulled her phone from her pocket. 7% battery. The flashlight would drain it fast. She turned it on anyway, and the thin, cold beam cut into the dark, and she started down. The ramp was longer than she had expected. 30 feet, maybe 40, sloping down at a steep angle into the earth. The air grew colder with every step. When she reached the bottom, she swept the light around and found herself in a long, low-ceiling room, supported by brick pillars. The floor was packed dirt. There was no electricity, no plumbing. Nothing to suggest the room had ever been finished for human use. Just storage. Just a cellar. Just a forgotten hollow carved out under a forgotten building. Wooden crates lined one wall, dozens of them stacked 2 and 3 high. Belle walked over and wiped the grime off the nearest one. Stenciled letters on the side read, Whitman and Sons Lot. 47. 1961. She tried to lift the lid. It was nailed shut. All of them, she realized, walking down the row. All of them sealed. all of them left behind when the business went under. She kept walking. The phone light picked out more crates, a rusted furnace, what looked like an old coal chute long since bricked over. At the far end of the basement, the wall made a strange turn. It jutted inward about 4 feet, then ran on for another 10, before returning to its original line. Belle stopped. She stood there with the phone held up and looked at that wall for a long time. A false wall, or the corner of another room. A closet built into the foundation, maybe for records, maybe for valuables. Back when a textile mill had needed to keep its ledgers somewhere safe from fire. She reached out and touched the brick. It was the same aged brick as the rest of the foundation, the same crumbling mortar, the same patina of 100 years of dampness. But when she knocked on it softly with her knuckles, the sound was different. It was hollow. She knocked again, 3 times, hollow. A space behind it. A space she had paid $150 to own and had not known existed. Her hand was shaking. Her whole arm was shaking. She told herself it was the cold. Belle stepped back. She told herself she would come back tomorrow. She told herself she needed to get home to Nora. She told herself all the sensible things, all the things a responsible mother and a tired woman at the end of a long day would tell herself. And then she turned around and walked back up the ramp and out through the warehouse floor, and out through the office and locked the padlock behind her, and drove home in the rain. She did not sleep that night. Not at all. Belle sat at the small table in the motel room with a cup of instant coffee and Henry Whitman's note spread out in front of her. Look where the river ran beneath. She had Googled the property that evening on her phone, found old city maps from 1890, 1910, 1930. There had been a river, a small tributary that had run through this section of Lancaster County in the 19th century. The maps showed it clearly snaking past the location where the mill would eventually be built. But by 1920, the river had been diverted, redirected into underground culverts as the city expanded. The mill had been built in 1928 according to the records Belle found. Built right over where the old riverbed had been. Look where the river ran beneath. The basement. The false wall at the back of the basement, where the foundation would have been dug deepest. Where the old river had once flowed. What I hid belongs to no one but the finder now. Belle's heart hammered in her chest. She looked over at Nora asleep in the other bed, her stuffed rabbit Clover tucked under her chin. Nora had asked her at dinner why she was so quiet. Just thinking about work, baby. Just thinking about work. The next morning, Belle called in sick to Millie's diner. She told Millie she had a stomach bug. Millie, who had been kind to her, who had never once asked why Belle sometimes showed up with red eyes, or why she always took the extra shifts, told her to rest and not to worry. Belle dropped Nora off at school. Then she drove to the hardware store on Route 30 and bought a crowbar, a heavy-duty flashlight, a hammer, and a box of work gloves. She paid in cash, $42. Her checking account now held $41. She drove to the mill. The sky was gray, but it was not raining. Belle unlocked the padlock. She walked through the office and across the main floor and down the concrete ramp into the basement with the new flashlight blazing bright and steady in her hand. She stood in front of the false wall. She ran her hand along the bricks, feeling for a loose one, for a seam, for a starting point. The mortar between the bricks of this section was paler than the mortar elsewhere in the basement. slightly, just slightly, as though it had been mixed from different materials or poured at a different time, as though someone at some point had built this wall long after the rest of the foundation had been built, and had tried to make it match and had almost succeeded. Belle chose a brick near the bottom roughly chest high and set the tip of her crowbar against the mortar line above it. She tapped the crowbar with the hammer. The mortar powdered and fell. She tapped again. More mortar. She worked around the brick, loosening its edges, and then she wedged the crowbar behind it and pulled. The brick came out, intact, surprisingly light. She set it on the ground and shone the flashlight into the hole. She could not see anything. The beam vanished into black. The air that came out of the hole was colder than the air in the basement. It had a smell she had not smelled before. Not mildew, not rot. Something dry. Something almost metallic. Something old in a way that was different from the rest of the building. Her heart was hammering now in a way she could not pretend was the cold. Belle pulled out a second brick, a third, a fourth. She worked for almost an hour, methodically setting each brick in a neat stack behind her, until she had opened a hole in the wall about 2 feet square. Her arms ached. Her back ached. She was sweating through her sweatshirt in the cold. She stopped. She crouched. She shone the flashlight through the hole, and the beam picked up something. Something metallic. A dull, heavy yellow gleam. Not the gleam of rust. Not the gleam of brass. Something warmer. Something deeper. Belle's mouth went dry. She told herself very calmly, very firmly, that what she was looking at was almost certainly brass. Brass fittings. Old brass valves from the furnace system. Or copper tarnished to a color that looked in the uncertain flashlight beam like something it was not. She told herself that gold was not real in the way that people imagined gold to be real. Gold did not simply sit behind walls. Gold belonged to countries and banks and very rich men and movies. Gold did not belong to 31-year-old single mothers in Pennsylvania living in motels. She reached her arm through the hole. The space on the other side was bigger than she had expected. Her hand found cold air, then cold stone floor, then something solid. She felt along its surface, a shape, a rectangular shape, heavy. Her fingers closed on it. She pulled it out through the hole. It was a bar, a small bar about the size and thickness of a bar of motel soap, but heavier by a magnitude she had not been prepared for. She had been expecting, from the look of it, maybe a pound. What she was holding felt like it was 5 or 6 times that. It was dense in the way that only one kind of thing is dense. Belle brought it up close to her face. She held the flashlight on it. There were markings stamped into its surface. A set of numbers she did not understand. A small shape like a bull or a buffalo. The number 400 ounces T. The letters fine gold, 99.99%. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped it. She set it down on the dirt floor very carefully, as if it might break through nothing in the world could have broken it. She sat down next to it. She did not realize she was crying until she tasted salt at the corner of her mouth. She looked back at the hole in the wall. She could see dimly in the beam of the flashlight that what lay behind the wall was not 1 bar, not 2, not 10, The hole went back farther than the beam could reach, and every flat surface her light touched showed her the same dull, warm yellow, the same stacked rectangular shapes, row upon row upon row in a space she could not yet see the end of. Belle said out loud to no one in the cold and the dark, "We're going to be okay." She said it again. She said it 3 times. "We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay." And then she put her head down on her knees, and she wept the way she had not wept since her mother's funeral. She wept for every single day of the last 4 months at the Riverbend Motel. She wept for Nora's asthma medication, and Nora's rabbit, and Nora's questions about why they couldn't have a house like other kids. She wept for the woman she had been at 22 when she had married Daniel, and thought she knew what her life was gonna be. She wept for her mother. She wept for Callum, who had tried to love her by warning her. She wept because she did not yet know what she was gonna do. She did not yet know if she could trust what she was seeing. She did not yet know any of the things she was gonna have to learn. But she knew one thing with a certainty that went down to the bottom of her bones. Her daughter was gonna have a house. Her daughter was gonna have a house, and the house was gonna have real windows that let the sun in. And her daughter was never gonna sleep in a rented room again. Belle wrapped the gold bar in 3 layers of plastic grocery bags she had brought with her. She put it in an old canvas tote. She carried it up the ramp and out through the warehouse and to her car in the gray afternoon light. She set it in the trunk of the Civic. She covered it with the emergency blanket she kept there. Then she drove home, and she did not stop checking the rearview mirror the entire way. That night, after Nora was asleep with Clover tucked under her chin, Belle sat at the motel table with the bar wrapped in towels on her lap and tried to think. She did not know what it was worth. She did not know exactly how to find out. She knew it was gold because the stamp had said gold. She knew it was heavy in the way gold was supposed to be heavy. She knew that if what she had glimpsed behind the wall was what she thought she had glimpsed, there were many more of these, possibly dozens, possibly hundreds, stacked in a hidden chamber beneath the floor of a building that she owned. Owned. That word again. She turned it over in her mind. Owned. The questions began to come at her in a rush. Was it legal? Was it hers? Whose had it been? How had it come to be there? Was there a record of it somewhere? Were there people somewhere waiting for it? Did the Whitman family, if any of the Whitmans were still alive, have a claim? Did the county have a claim? Did the IRS have a claim? What did you do if you were a woman with $41 in her checking account, and you were suddenly possibly standing on top of a fortune that was not the kind of fortune anyone in your family had ever had or known how to have? Belle made herself breathe. She made herself think practically. First, she thought she needed to know what she actually had, not guess. No. She needed to find out without tipping her hand to anyone what the bar was actually worth, and whether the stamps on it were authentic, and whether anything about the situation made her a criminal simply for having found it. She needed a lawyer. A quiet lawyer. A lawyer who would not run to a newspaper, or to another lawyer, or to the county the moment she walked in the door. She did not know any such lawyers, but she knew someone who might. She knew someone who had used a lawyer once to sort out his own father's estate. That someone was her brother, Callum. She did not want to call Callum. Callum was going to say, "I told you so about the warehouse," and he was going to say it was crazy what she had found. And he was going to try to take over because he was 4 years older than her. And that was what he did. But Callum was also, she had to admit, the only person in her life who had ever actually shown up when it counted. Callum had driven through a snowstorm to sit with her the night Daniel left. Callum had co-signed the lease on the Harrisburg apartment when nobody else would. Callum was exhausted and overworked and bitter about the way his own life had gone. But Callum was hers. Belle called him the next morning from the parking lot of Millie's Diner at 6:45, sitting in the Civic with the engine running and the heat blowing on her hands 12 minutes before her shift started. "Cal, it's Belle." "Jesus, it's not even 7. "I know. I'm sorry. I need to ask you something. Something happened. I don't know. Maybe I need a lawyer." A long pause. She could hear him breathing. She could hear behind him the small domestic sounds of his apartment in Reading. The kettle, maybe the TV on low. The dog they had taken in last winter moving around on the wood floor. "What kind of lawyer?" he said finally. "A quiet one." "Belle, what is going on?" "I can't tell you on the phone." "Is it about the warehouse?" "Yes." "Is it bad? Is it like, is the EPA crawling all over you now? Is it a body? Please tell me it isn't a body." She almost laughed. "It's not a body. Cal, please, I just need the name of a lawyer. Somebody who handles property stuff. Somebody who, if I told them something unusual, wouldn't tell anyone else. I remember you used somebody when Dad's house had to be sorted out. That was Whitmore. Arnold Whitmore. He's 70-something. He's in Lancaster. But Belle, if you're in trouble, I'm not in trouble. I might be I don't know what I'm in. I'm in something. But it's not trouble." Another pause. She could picture him rubbing his face with his free hand, the way he always did when she was asking him for something he did not want to give but was gonna give anyway. "Call him today," Callum said. "Tell him I gave you his name. He'll at least talk to you." "Thank you, Cal. Whatever it is, you call me if you need me. You actually call me. Do not do the thing where you try to handle it yourself, and then I find out about it 6 months later from someone else. I won't. Promise. I promise." She hung up. Arnold Whitmore's office was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house on a quiet street in Lancaster. The staircase creaked. The woman at the front desk smiled at her and said, "He'll see you right in," and waved her toward a door at the end of the hall. Belle knocked. A voice said, "Come." The office was small, warm, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco that had not been smoked in that room in 30 years, but had soaked into the paneling forever. Books everywhere. Law books, yes, but also novels, histories. A few volumes of poetry on a low shelf by the window. Arnold Whitmore sat behind a heavy oak desk. He was small, compact, bald on top, with a ring of white hair around the sides, clean-shaven, with dark eyes that took Belle in all at once, in a way that she had not been taken in by anyone for a long time. "Miss Hargrove, please sit." Belle sat. "Tell me what happened." She told him. She told him about the auction, about the warehouse, about the note, about the hollow wall. about the brick she had removed, about the bar she had pulled out. She did not cry. She had promised herself on the drive over that she would not cry. She spoke in short, factual sentences the way she would have reported something to a manager at one of her old jobs. Arnold Whitmore listened without interrupting, his hands folded on the desk in front of him, his eyes steady on her face. When she was done, he said, "You brought it." "Yes, I told you not to. I know. I wanted you to see it." He nodded slowly. May I Bell took the canvas tote from her lap. She unwrapped the towels. She set the bar on his desk. It made a heavy final sound on the wood, and she realized only after she had set it down that she had never placed it on any surface more dignified than a concrete floor or the carpeted bed of her trunk, and that it looked on the polished oak of a lawyer's desk like something that had finally come home. Arnold Whitmore looked at it for a long time. He did not pick it up. He leaned forward, examined the stamps, turned his head slightly to see from a different angle. He opened a drawer and took out a jeweler's loupe and brought it to his eye and studied the markings up close. He set the loupe down. He said very quietly, "This is a London good delivery bar." I don't know what that means. It means it was cast to the specifications of the London Bullion Market Association. It is a standard bar used in institutional trade between central banks and major dealers. 400 troy ounces, 99.99% fine gold. This is not a collectible. This is not jewelry. This is what countries keep in their vaults. Bell felt the room tilt. "The refiner's mark here," Arnold continued. "Do you see this bull? This shape, that is a specific refinery. I would need to look it up to be certain, but the serial number will be traceable in some registries." He took off his glasses. He polished them slowly with a handkerchief that he produced from his suit jacket pocket. He put them back on. He said, "At current prices, one of these bars is worth approximately $1.3 million, give or take." Belle had been bracing herself. She had been bracing herself all night and all morning. But hearing the number said aloud in a quiet voice by a man in a brown suit in an office in Lancaster was different from imagining the number in the dark at 3 in the morning. The room tilted again. She put her hand flat on the arm of the chair to steady herself. "Miss Hargrove, breathe." "I'm breathing." "Slower." She slowed. Arnold Whitmore waited. He did not rush her. He did not look at his watch. He simply sat across from her and waited for her to find her feet again. And when she had, he spoke. "I'm going to tell you some things now. Listen carefully. You are not going to like some of them, but you need to hear them. Yes. First, under Pennsylvania law, as the titled owner of the real property, you have a strong legal claim to items concealed within that property, provided certain conditions are met. The law distinguishes between treasure trove, mislaid property, lost property, and abandoned property. Different rules apply to each. The most important question is whether anyone else has a superior claim. A prior owner, an heir, a victim of theft, an institution that can prove provenance. Okay. Second, the building has a history. Whitman and Sons was at its height a significant regional textile concern. Henry Whitman, the founder's son, ran that mill from the early 1950s until it closed in 1978. He died in 1984. I remember the obituary. He had no surviving children. His wife predeceased him. There was a nephew, I believe, who inherited what little was left of the estate, which at the time of Henry's death did not include the mill itself. The mill had already been transferred to a holding company that later went bankrupt, which is how the county eventually ended up with the title through tax default. That is how it came to auction. That is how you came to own it. Bell nodded slowly. Arnold reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. He opened it. Inside were printed pages, documents, photographs. I did some preliminary research this morning after you called, he said. I wanted to be prepared. He slid one of the pages across the desk to her. It was a newspaper article. Philadelphia Inquirer, October 1973. The headline read, Federal Reserve heist nets $287 million in gold bars. Bell's blood went cold. Arnold continued, his voice measured. In October of 1973, 4 men robbed the Federal Reserve facility in Philadelphia. They got away with 220 gold bars, approximately $287 million at the time. The gold was never recovered. 2 of the thieves died in prison. 1 disappeared and is presumed dead. The 4th man, Gerald Morrison, was released on compassionate grounds in 1982. Terminal cancer. He died later that same year. He slid another page across. A mugshot. A man in his 60s. Gaunt. Hollow-eyed. Gerald Morrison, Arnold said. And this is Henry Whitman. Another photograph. 2 young men in their 20s standing side by side, smiling, the ocean behind them. They grew up together, Arnold said. Same neighborhood, same school. As far as I can tell from public records, they remained friends their entire lives. Bell stared at the photographs, at the 2 young men, at the ocean, at their smiles. Arnold, she said quietly, are you telling me Henry Whitman stole that gold? I'm telling you that the refinery mark on the bar you brought me matches the batch stolen in 1973. I'm telling you that Gerald Morrison, one of the thieves, was Henry Whitman's oldest friend. And I'm telling you that when Morrison got out of prison in '82 and died shortly thereafter, the gold had still not been found. Bell felt sick, but Arnold continued, leaning back in his chair. There's more to this story. I think we need to go back to that mill. I think we need to see if Henry left us any other messages. They went that afternoon. Arnold drove. Bell sat in the passenger seat of his immaculate Volvo and watched the gray Pennsylvania landscape roll past and tried to process what she had just learned. The mill looked different in the daylight, less ominous, just old, just tired. Arnold walked slowly, taking everything in with the careful attention of a man trained to notice details. He said nothing until they reached the basement. Then he stood at the base of the ramp and said, "Show me." Bell led him to the false wall, to the hole she had made. Arnold shone his own flashlight through and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Miss Hargrove, we need to see the upstairs." They climbed the interior stairs to the 4th floor, the top floor. Most of it was open space the same as the others. But in the far corner there was a small room. The door was ajar. Inside, a narrow bed, a nightstand, a lamp, a hot plate, a few books on a makeshift shelf. Dust everywhere. But the room had the quality of a place where someone had lived. Recently. Or as recently as 40 years ago could be called recent. Henry lived here, Arnold said quietly, after the mill closed. He lived here until he died. Belle looked around, at the bed, at the books, at the window that looked out over the parking lot and the fence and the road beyond. Arnold knelt by the bed. He ran his hand along the floorboards. Then he stopped. His fingers had found something. "Help me," he said. Together they pried up a section of the floorboard. Beneath it, a small metal box, rusted but intact. Arnold lifted it out, set it on the bed, opened it. Inside, a leather journal, a stack of letters, and a single photograph. Arnold opened the journal carefully. The pages were yellowed. The ink had faded in places. But the handwriting was clear. The same elegant script from the note Belle had found in the envelope at the auction. He read aloud. November 1978. The mill is finished. Everything I built. Gone. He turned the page. January 1979. Gerald came to me. Dying. Desperate. No family left. He had the gold. His greatest sin and his only asset. He begged me to hide it, to keep it safe. Not for him. He knew he was beyond saving. But for someone, anyone. In case there was ever a future that needed it. Arnold turned another page. March 1979. I made a choice. I hid what he gave me. Not for myself. I could never touch it. It's tainted. But for Theo, for my nephew, when he's ready, when he needs it, if he ever comes back. Belle's throat closed. May 1983. Arnold read. Gerald died last month. The cancer. He went quietly. The secret dies with us both. Theo will find it when he needs it most. If he ever comes back. If he ever looks. Arnold closed the journal. He looked at Belle, at the tears on her face. Henry Whitman didn't steal the gold, Arnold said. Gerald Morrison gave it to him. Morrison was dying. He had no one. And Henry hid it. For his nephew. For the future. For whoever was brave enough to find it. Belle wiped her eyes. So it's not stolen. Legally, the statute of limitations on theft expired decades ago. The Federal Reserve was reimbursed by insurance in 1974. There are no living victims, no unpaid debts, morally. That's a more complicated question. But legally, Miss Hargrove, as the owner of this property and as the finder of concealed assets within it, you have a legitimate claim. Belle sat down on the dusty floor. She put her head in her hands. What about Theo, she said. Henry's nephew. Where is he? Arnold was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll find him. And when I do, I think you're going to want to have a conversation with him." They were loading the journal and the letters back into the metal box when Belle heard it. Footsteps downstairs. Arnold heard it too. He held up a hand. Quiet. They moved to the doorway. Listened. The footsteps were coming up the stairs. Slow. Deliberate. Belle's heart hammered. She looked around for something, anything. Her hand closed on a length of old pipe lying in the corner. The footsteps reached the 4th floor, came down the hall, stopped outside the door. A man's voice. Professional. Calm. "Miss Hargrove, I know you're in there. My name is Silas Donovan. I'm a private investigator. I represent interested parties who would very much like to speak with you about what you found in the basement." Belle and Arnold exchanged a glance. Arnold stepped forward, opened the door. A man stood in the hallway, mid-40s, expensive suit, camera around his neck. "Mr. Donovan." Arnold said, his voice cold. "You're trespassing." Silas smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "I'm doing my job, Mr. Whitmore, just like you're doing yours." He looked past Arnold to Belle, held up the camera. "I have photographs," he said, "of Miss Hargrove removing items from this property, of her vehicle, of the gentleman who visited the Delaware vault facility on her behalf yesterday." Belle felt ice in her stomach. "My clients," Silas continued, "are prepared to make a very generous offer for this property and its contents. Far more generous than what Miss Hargrove paid. I suggest you consider it carefully before this situation becomes more complicated than it needs to be." He set a business card on the floor just inside the door. Then he turned and walked back down the hall. His footsteps echoed on the stairs. Belle and Arnold stood in the doorway until they heard the front door of the mill close. Then Arnold picked up the card. "Brennan Development Group," he read. "Richard Brennan, President and CEO." He looked at Belle. "We need to move fast," he said, "before Mr. Brennan makes good on whatever threat he's preparing. We need to secure the gold. We need to find Theo Whitman. And we need to do both in the next 48 hours. Belle nodded. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, something sharper. She looked at Arnold. "Then let's get to work." The armored truck arrived at 3 in the morning. Belle stood in the basement of the Whitman mill with Arnold beside her and watched 4 men in tactical gear descend the ramp with equipment that looked like it belonged in a bank vault. They moved with the efficiency of people who had done this kind of work before and did not ask questions they did not need answered. It had been 36 hours since Silas Donovan had appeared in the upstairs hallway. 36 hours since Arnold had looked at her and said, "We need to move fast." They had moved fast. Arnold had made calls. Discreet calls to people he had worked with over 40 years of estate law people who knew how to move valuable items without drawing attention. People who understood that sometimes the law moves slower than necessity required. The vault facility was in Delaware, a private operation. No questions. No paperwork that would find its way into public records. Not yet. Not until Belle was ready. The men worked in silence. They had brought industrial lights that turned the basement into something close to daylight. Belle watched as they carefully removed the remaining bricks from the false wall, widening the opening until a man could walk through upright. Then she watched as they went inside. The chamber behind the wall was larger than she had imagined. 12 feet deep, 8 feet wide, 7 feet tall. And it was filled floor to ceiling with gold bars stacked in precise rows. One of the men emerged with a tablet. He showed Arnold the inventory count. 217 bars. Arnold did the math quietly. At 1.3 million per bar, that's $282 million. Belle sat down on a wooden crate. She had thought she was prepared. She had thought knowing the number would make it real. But hearing it said aloud, watching these professional men in tactical gear treat her crumbling basement like a Federal Reserve, made something shift inside her chest. $282 million. Her mother had died with $1,700 in savings and a credit card she could not pay off. Belle had lived the last 4 months on $83 and whatever tips she could scrape together at the diner. Nora's asthma medication cost $42 a month, and Belle had been splitting the pills to make them last. And beneath her feet, beneath the building she had bought for $150, there had been $282 million in gold. The men loaded the bars into reinforced cases. They carried them up the ramp one at a time. The truck was unmarked, white, anonymous. Belle watched it swallow case after case until the basement chamber was empty, and there was nothing left but brick and dirt and the ghost of what had been hidden there for 40 years. The lead man handed Arnold a receipt. A simple piece of paper with a case number and a signature. No dollar amounts, no descriptions, just proof that something had been moved from one location to another. Then the truck was gone, and Belle and Arnold stood in the basement in the sudden silence and looked at the empty chamber. "It's done," Arnold said. "The gold is secure. Now we find Theo." They found him the next morning. Arnold's investigator, a woman named Sarah Fan, who had once worked for the FBI and now took private contracts, located Theodore Whitman in Flagstaff, Arizona. Age 74, retired high school history teacher, widower, no children, living on a pension that barely covered his rent. Sarah had pulled his financial records discreetly through channels Belle did not ask about. Theo Whitman had medical debt, $158,000. His wife Eleanor had died of cancer in 2019. The treatments had bankrupted them both. Eleanor had died anyway. Theo had been making payments on the debt for 4 years. $60 a month. At that rate, he would finish paying it off approximately 219 years from now. Belle sat in Arnold's office and looked at the file Sarah had compiled. At the photograph of Theo. An older man with thin white hair and wire-rimmed glasses and a face that looked tired in a way that went deeper than age. "We need to call him," Belle said. Arnold nodded. "But before we do, you need to decide what you're going to offer him." Belle looked up. "What do you mean?" Arnold leaned back in his chair. "Legally, you have no obligation to give Theodore Whitman anything. Henry's will left everything to Theo, yes, but the mill was not part of Henry's estate when he died. It had already been transferred to the holding company. The holding company went bankrupt. The county took the property. You bought it. Clean chain of title. The gold was concealed property found within a structure you legally own. Under Pennsylvania law, it's yours." He paused. "But morally," he continued, "Henry hid that gold for Theo. That was his intent. His dying wish, if you want to be dramatic about it. Theo never knew. Henry died before he could tell him. But the intent was there. Belle looked down at the photograph again, at Theo's tired face. How much should I give him? That's your decision, Arnold said. But if you want my opinion, I'd say 10%. Belle did the math. 10% of $282 million. $28 million to a man living on a pension paying $60 a month toward debt he would never clear. $28 million was not just money. It was a reprieve. It was the rest of his life handed back to him. Yes, Belle said. 10%. $28 million. That's what Henry would have wanted. Arnold picked up the phone. Theodore Whitman answered on the fourth ring. His voice was rough, uncertain. The voice of a man who did not get many phone calls and expected the ones he did get to be bad news. Hello, Mr. Whitman. My name is Arnold Whitmore. I'm an attorney calling from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I apologize for contacting you out of the blue. Is this a good time to speak? A long pause. Belle could hear the suspicion in the silence. Lancaster, Theo said finally. I haven't heard from anyone in Lancaster in 40 years. What is this about? It concerns your late uncle Henry Whitman and the old textile mill. Another pause. Longer this time. The mill's been closed since the 70s. My uncle's been dead since '84. Is this some kind of scam? Arnold's voice remained calm, professional. It is not a scam, Mr. Whitman. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Pennsylvania. You can look me up. I will give you my bar association number, and you can call me back at your convenience if you prefer. I am calling on behalf of my client who is the current legal owner of the mill property and who has made a discovery on that property that concerns your uncle's estate. A discovery we believe you should be made aware of. Silence. Then, quietly, what kind of discovery? Arnold glanced at Belle. Belle nodded. Mr. Whitman, Arnold said, there is a concealed chamber in the basement of the mill. It appears to have been constructed by your uncle in all likelihood during the last years of his life. My client found it while inspecting the property. The chamber contains a substantial quantity of gold bars. The silence this time was so long. Belle wondered if the call had dropped. Then, Theo's voice, barely a whisper, gold. Yes, sir. How much gold? Arnold paused. Quite a lot, Mr. Whitman. The estimate is approximately 217 bars. We believe your uncle hid them there in the late 1970s, shortly before his death. Belle heard something on the other end of the line, a sound like air being let out slowly, like a man sitting down heavily. I don't understand, Theo said. Belle leaned forward toward the speakerphone. Mr. Whitman, my name is Belle Hargrove. I'm the one who found it. I just wanted you to hear this from a person, not just from a lawyer. I'm sorry for the way this must be coming at you. I know it's strange. I know you don't know me. Theo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, how did you find it? I bought the mill at a county auction for $150. I was just trying to find a place my daughter and I could live. I went down to the basement, and there was a wall that sounded hollow when I knocked on it. So I opened it up, and there was gold. Yes, sir. Belle heard him breathing, heard the small sounds of a room in Arizona, a clock ticking, maybe a fan running. My Uncle Theo said slowly he never told me anything. When he died, they said there was nothing, just the mill, and the mill was already gone, bankrupt. I tried to visit him in '83. I was living in Philadelphia then, teaching. I wrote him a letter. It came back marked occupant deceased. I thought he'd forgotten about me. Belle felt her throat tighten. Mr. Whitman, Arnold said gently, we found your uncle's journal in the room where he lived on the top floor of the mill. He didn't forget you. He wrote about you. He hid the gold for you. Theo made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. For me, he said, Jesus, for me. Mr. Whitman Bell said there's something else you should know. The gold, it came from your uncle's friend, Gerald Morrison. Do you remember him? Jerry, Theo said immediately. Yeah, I remember Jerry. He and Uncle Henry grew up together. They were like brothers. Jerry got in trouble. Some kind of federal thing. I was just a kid. I didn't understand. But Uncle Henry never spoke to him again. Or at least I thought he didn't. Jerry Morrison was one of the men who robbed the Federal Reserve in 1973, Arnold said. He stole the gold. When he was released from prison in '82, dying of cancer, he gave it to your uncle. Asked him to hide it. Your uncle did. For you. Belle heard Theo crying now. Quiet. The kind of crying a man does when he is alone, and has been alone for a long time. Miss Hargrove, Theo said, after a moment, his voice thick. Why are you telling me this? You found it. It's yours. You could have sold it quietly. Nobody would have known. Belle looked at Arnold. Arnold nodded. Because it's not mine, Belle said. Not really. Your uncle meant it for you. And I have a daughter, Mr. Whitman. Her name is Nora. She's 7. And I want her to grow up knowing that when her mother found something that wasn't hers, her mother did the right thing with it. Theo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, What are you proposing? 10%, Belle said. $28 million. That's what Mr. Whitmore thinks is fair. That's what I think your uncle would have wanted. The silence stretched out. Belle could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Theo spoke. His voice was different now, steadier. Miss Hargrove, he said, my wife died 4 years ago. Cancer. The treatments cost everything we had and everything we could borrow. She died anyway. I've been paying off the debt ever since. $60 a month. It's all I can afford. I calculated once that I'd be 237 years old when I finished paying it off. He paused. I don't know what to do with what you're telling me. He continued. I don't know how to hold it, but I want you to know that I accept. And I will try to use it in a way my uncle would not have found contemptible. That's all I can promise. Belle wiped her eyes. That's all I would ever ask, she said. There was a sudden sound on the other end of the line, a sharp intake of breath, a gasp. Mr. Whitman, Belle said. Are you all right? Silence. Then a sound like something heavy falling. A phone clattering. "Mr. Whitman." A different voice came on the line. Female. Urgent. "Hello? Who is this?" "This is Belle Hargrove. I was just speaking with Theodore Whitman. Is he okay?" "He collapsed. I'm his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. I heard him cry out through the wall. I have my key. I'm with him now. He's breathing, but he's clutching his chest. I'm calling an ambulance." Belle's heart stopped. Is it his heart? I don't know. "The paramedics are coming. I have to go." "Wait, please. Can you tell him? Can you tell him it's gonna be okay, that we're going to take care of everything?" "I'll tell him. I have to call 911 now." The line went dead. Belle stared at Arnold. He collapsed. "We just told a 74-year-old man with a heart condition that he's getting $28 million and his uncle didn't forget him," and Arnold was already on his phone, calling the investigator, getting the address, finding the hospital. 20 minutes later, Sarah called back. Theo was at Flagstaff Medical Center. Stable. Not a heart attack. Severe anxiety attack. The shock. The emotion. His body had simply given out under the weight of what he'd been told. "He's going to be okay," Sarah said. "But Belle, he's asking for you. He wants to know if it's real. If you're real." Belle looked at Arnold. "I'm flying to Arizona." Arnold nodded. "Go. I'll handle everything here." Belle booked a flight that left in 4 hours. She drove back to the motel, threw clothes in a bag, asked Jude Patterson to watch Nora. Jude looked at her with concern. "Belle, honey, what's going on?" "I can't explain everything right now, but I found something. Something big. And there's a man in Arizona who needs to know it's real. I'll be back in 2 days. Please, Jude. Can you watch Nora?" Jude pulled her into a hug. "Of course. You go do what you need to do." Belle landed in Flagstaff at 11 that night. Took a cab directly to the hospital. Found Theo's room on the 3rd floor. He was awake, sitting up in bed, IV in his arm, heart monitor beeping steadily. He looked small in the hospital bed, fragile. But his eyes were clear. "Miss Hargrove," he said when she walked in. "Mr. Whitman." Belle pulled a chair close to the bed. "I'm so sorry. We shouldn't have told you like that. We should have been more careful." Theo shook his head. "No. I'm glad you told me. I couldn't breathe. 74 years and nobody ever my uncle, he saw me. He remembered me." "He did," Belle said. "He wrote about you in his journal. He hid that gold hoping you'd find it someday." Theo's eyes filled. "Can you tell me about the mill? What it's like now?" Belle spent the next hour telling him everything. About buying it for $150. About the note. About the hollow wall. About Henry's room on the 4th floor. About the journal entries. About Gerald Morrison and the Federal Reserve and the statute of limitations. Theo listened, asked questions, smiled when Belle described the old sewing tables still standing in rows. My uncle loved that mill, he said. It broke his heart when it closed. We're going to fix it, Belle said. We're going to make it something again. Theo looked at her for a long moment. You're really going to give me 10%? Yes. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And because I want my daughter to see her mother do the right thing. Theo reached out, took her hand. His grip was weak but steady. Thank you, he said. Thank you for coming all this way, for making an old man believe in something again. Belle squeezed his hand. Get some rest, Mr. Whitman. When you're feeling better, you're going to come to Pennsylvania. You're going to see the mill, and we're going to figure out together what your uncle would want us to build. Arnold walked Theo through the mechanics over the next few days once Theo was released from the hospital. Carefully, patiently. Documents would need to be filed. Genealogical records located. Proof of relationship established. The process would take time. Months, not weeks. But it would be done correctly. Belle flew home, hugged Nora tight, went back to work at the diner, and waited for what would come next. Arnold was right. The story broke 3 days later. Belle was at work when it happened. Thursday afternoon lunch rush at Millie's diner. She was refilling coffee for a table of construction workers when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. She ignored it. She was not supposed to check her phone during shifts. Millie was kind, but she had rules. But when Belle went to the kitchen to pick up an order, Millie was standing there, with her own phone in her hand, and her face pale. Millie said, "You need to see this." She turned her phone around. The headline was from the Lancaster Intelligencer. Local woman finds $282 million in stolen gold in abandoned mill. Below it, a photograph. Belle walking to her car in the mill parking lot 3 days ago, carrying something wrapped in towels. Belle's hands went numb. How she whispered. Millie shook her head. I don't know, honey, but it's everywhere. News sites, social media. Everyone's talking about it. Belle pulled out her own phone. 17 missed calls. 34 text messages. Her voicemail was full. She scrolled through the messages. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, producers, people asking for interviews, for comments for her story. One was from Callum. 3 words, call me now. Another was from Arnold. Do not speak to anyone. Come to my office immediately. Belle looked at Millie. I have to go. Millie nodded. Go. Don't worry about the shift. Just go. Belle drove to Arnold's office through a haze of shock. When she arrived, there were news vans parked on the street. Cameras, reporters saw her pull up and rush toward her car. Miss Hargrove, is it true you found nearly $300 million? Did you know the gold was there when you bought the property? What are you going to do with the money? Belle put her head down and walked fast. Arnold met her at the door, pulled her inside, locked it behind her. In his office, Sarah Fan was already there, the investigator. She had a laptop open and was scrolling through news sites. How did they find out? Belle asked. Sarah turned the laptop around. An email sent to every major news outlet in Pennsylvania and several national ones from an anonymous account. The subject line, Belle Hargrove and the Whitman Gold. The message was brief. Belle Hargrove of Lancaster County found approximately 217 gold bars worth $282 million in the basement of the Whitman Mill. The gold matches bars stolen in the 1973 Federal Reserve heist. Story of the decade. Attached were photographs. Belle carrying items to her car. The armored truck at the mill at 3 in the morning. A scanned copy of the auction receipt showing Belle had purchased the property for $150. Who sent this? Belle asked. Sarah pointed to the email address. Justice Seeker 1973 at protonmail.com. Proton Mail is encrypted, Sarah said. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing, but the photographs, those came from somewhere. Someone's been watching you, Silas Donovan Arnold said. Brennan's investigator. Sarah nodded. Almost certainly. Belle sat down. Her legs felt weak. What do we do? Arnold pulled out a legal pad. First, he said, you do not speak to any reporter. Not one. Not now. If you want to make a statement later, we'll do it on our terms. But right now, silence. Second, we need to prepare for litigation. Brennan is going to file a claim. Probably within the next 48 hours. He'll argue he had prior interest in the property, that you had insider knowledge something. It won't have merit, but it will tie us up in court. Third, we accelerate the Theo Whitman process. We need his claim documented and filed before anyone else can complicate it. And fourth, Arnold looked at Belle carefully. You need to prepare yourself. The next few weeks are going to be very difficult. Your life is about to become public in ways you will not enjoy. Belle drove back to the Riverbend Motel in the late afternoon. There were news vans there too, parked outside her room. Cameras pointed at her door. Nora was inside with Judith Patterson from 2 doors down. Jude, as everyone called her. Jude was 68, a widow who lived on Social Security and had somehow over the last 4 months become the closest thing to family Belle had in Lancaster, besides Callum. Jude had her considerable bulk planted in front of Belle's door and was telling a reporter in no uncertain terms that if he did not get his camera out of this child's face, she was going to call the police, and then she was going to call her son, who was 6'4" and worked construction. The reporter retreated. Belle parked and walked quickly to the room. Jude saw her and pulled her inside. Nora was sitting on the bed clutching her stuffed rabbit clover. Her eyes were red. Mama, she said, why are there cameras? Belle knelt down in front of her daughter. She took Nora's hands. Baby, she said, something happened. Something big. I found something in the building I bought. Something valuable. And now people want to know about it. They want to take pictures and ask questions. But it's going to be okay. I promise. We're going to be okay. Nora looked at her with those enormous brown eyes that had always seen more than a 7-year-old should have to see. Are we in trouble? No, baby. We're not in trouble. Are we going to have to leave Belle's throat closed? She pulled Nora into her arms. No. She whispered into her daughter's hair. We are never leaving again. I promise you. No matter what happens, we are done running. That night after Nora was asleep, Belle sat at the motel table with Jude and told her everything. The auction, the note, the gold, Theo Whitman, the phone call. The $28 million she had promised him. Jude listened without interrupting. When Belle was done, Jude sat back in the plastic chair and looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Belle Hargrove, you are either the dumbest woman I have ever met or the best one. I'm still deciding which." Belle almost laughed. "I think I'm both." Jude reached across the table and took Belle's hand. Her palm was rough-worn from 70 years of work. "Whatever happens now," she said, "you remember this. You did the right thing. That matters. That will always matter." The lawsuit came 2 days later. Richard Brennan filed a claim in Lancaster County Court. The document was 63 pages long and argued that Brennan Development Group had maintained a continuous interest in the Whitman Mill property for the past 8 years, that Belle had purchased the property with insider knowledge of its contents, and that the auction had been conducted improperly. Brennan demanded either 50% of the gold's value or the return of the property to county control so it could be re-auctioned. Arnold read the filing and called it creative fiction. But creative or not, it meant court. It meant delays. It meant Belle's claim to the gold would be contested for months, possibly years. The media picked up the story immediately. Developer claims waitress defrauded him in gold discovery. Public opinion split. Half the comments Belle saw online supported her. She's a single mom who got lucky. Good for her. She deserves it. The other half were suspicious. Too convenient. She had to have known. Nobody just stumbles into $300 million. And then her ex-husband appeared on television. Daniel. The man who had left her 4 months ago. The man who had emptied their joint bank account and moved to Pittsburgh with a woman named Crystal. He was on a local news program sitting in a studio looking earnest and concerned. The interviewer asked him, "You were married to Belle Hargrove. What can you tell us about her?" Daniel shook his head sadly. "Belle's always been a schemer. Always looking for the angle. I'm not saying she did anything illegal, but it doesn't surprise me that she'd find a way to come out on top." Belle watched the interview at Jude's motel room because she could not bear to watch it in front of Nora. She sat on Jude's couch and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Jude saw her face. "Don't," she said. "Don't let him get to you." But it was too late. The damage was done. The interview was everywhere by morning. Callum called that night. "Belle, I need to talk to you." His voice sounded strange, tight. "What's wrong? Can I come over?" He arrived 20 minutes later. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted. He sat down at the motel table and put his head in his hands. Cal Bell said, "What's going on?" He looked up at her. His eyes were red. "Belle, I've been thinking. About the gold. About what you found." "Okay." Callum took a deep breath. "What if we just took some of it? Before the lawyers get it all. Just a few bars, 3 or 4. Nobody would miss them." The count was 217, right? If it became 213, who would know? Belle stared at her brother. "Cal," she said, slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we've been poor our whole lives, Belle. Mom died with nothing. You've been living in a motel for 4 months. My kids need braces I can't afford. Elaine's car died last month and we can't replace it. He leaned forward. This is our chance, our one chance, and you're just giving it away. 28 million to some old man you've never met. Why? Why does he deserve it and we don't? Belle felt something break inside her. Get out, she said, quietly. Belle, get out. Get out of my room. Get out now. Callum stood up. His face was red. You're making a mistake. No, Belle said, and her voice was shaking now. You're making a mistake. You're asking me to steal, to teach my daughter that family means enabling theft. Get out, Cal. Don't come back until you remember who we are. Callum left. The door slammed behind him. Belle sat at the table and put her head down and cried. Arnold called her the next morning. His voice was tight. Belle, we have a problem. What now? The vault in Delaware. They did a complete inventory last night. Standard procedure. The count came back at 214 bars. Belle's stomach dropped. We moved 217. I know. Where are the other 3? That's what we need to find out. Belle's mind raced. 3 bars. At $1.3 million each. $3.9 million missing. The vault has security footage, Arnold said. They're reviewing it now. But, Belle, I have to ask, who besides us knew about the move? Just you, me, and the transport team. And Belle closed her eyes. And Callum. I told him we were moving the gold. He asked when. I told him Tuesday night. Arnold was quiet. He visited the vault. Arnold said finally. Yesterday afternoon. Used your name to get access. Said he was your representative. They led him into the viewing room. No, Belle whispered. I'm sorry. The police are involved now. This is theft during transport. Federal, possibly given the value. Belle felt sick. She called Callum. He did not answer. She called again and again. Finally, he picked up. Cal, she said, where are you? I'm home. The police are looking for you. Silence. Cal, did you take 3 bars from the vault? She heard him breathing. Then quietly, yes. Belle closed her eyes. Why? Because nobody was gonna miss them, Belle. Because we deserve something too. Because I'm tired of watching you give everything away. Where are they now? I sold them. Quick sale. Underground dealer. Got 2.6 million. Already in an offshore account. Jesus, Cal. Don't judge me, Belle. Don't you dare judge me. I've been there for you your whole life. I co-signed your apartment. I drove through a snowstorm when Daniel left. I've sacrificed everything for you and Mom and everyone else. And what do I have to show for it? Debt. Exhaustion. A wife who's tired and kids I can't provide for. So you stole from me. I took what was owed. Belle was crying now, quietly. You betrayed me, Cal. You betrayed Nora. You betrayed everything Mom tried to teach us. Mom died with nothing, Callum said, and his voice broke. She died in a rented room with nothing. And you're heading the same direction, Belle. You're gonna give it all away and end up right back where you started. And I will not watch that happen. Belle took a deep breath. You have 48 hours. What? Return the money. Every penny. You have 48 hours. If you do, we never speak of this again. If you don't, I turn the evidence over to the police. Belle, you're my brother, but I have a daughter to raise, and I will not teach her that family means enabling theft. 48 hours, Cal. She hung up. That night, Belle could not sleep. She lay in the dark in the motel room and listened to Nora breathing and thought about her brother and her mother and every choice that had led to this moment. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She got dressed quietly and drove to the mill. The building was dark, silent. Belle let herself in with her key and climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, to Henry's room. She sat on the floor where the bed had been and looked out the window at the parking lot and the fence and the road beyond. She thought about Henry Whitman living here alone for 6 years after the mill closed, eating on a hot plate, sleeping on a narrow bed, guarding a secret he could never tell. Why had he done it? Why had he protected Gerald Morrison's stolen gold? Why had he hidden it instead of turning it in? Belle stood up, walked to the corner where Arnold had found the metal box with the journal. The journal was gone now. Arnold had it. But Belle remembered what it had said. Gerald came to me, dying, desperate. He had the gold, his greatest sin and his only asset. Belle knelt down, ran her hands along the floorboards where the box had been hidden, and her fingers caught on something. A gap between 2 boards. She pried them up, beneath another space, smaller, and inside a single envelope. Belle's hands shook as she opened it. Inside a letter, dated April 1984, 1 month before Henry died. The handwriting was shakier than in the journal, weaker. Belle read by the light of her phone. To Theodore or whoever finds this, if you are reading this, I am gone. The gold in the basement came from my dearest friend, Gerald Morrison. Jerry made a terrible mistake in 1973. He stole that gold from the Federal Reserve. He spent 9 years in prison for it. When he was released dying of cancer, he came to me with nothing but that gold and a question. He asked me, do I deserve to die with nothing, Henry? After everything I've been after the war, after Leyte Gulf, after I pulled you from that burning compartment, do I deserve to die with nothing? I told him no. I told him I would hide the gold for him, not for him to use. He was beyond that. But for the future, for someone who might need it, for someone who might do good with it, I hid it for you, Theo. I always hoped you would come back, that you would find it, that you would use it to build something better than what Jerry and I built. But if you are not, Theo, if you are a stranger reading this, then I ask you, do not let this gold poison you. It was born in sin, but it does not have to die in sin. Use it to build something good. Make this town whole again. The mill employed 200 families once. When we closed, we broke something in this community. We broke something in ourselves. Fix it, if you can, if you are brave enough. Your loving Uncle Henry Whitman. Belle read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope and sat in the dark of Henry's room and understood. Henry had not been protecting stolen gold. He had been protecting his friend's last chance at redemption. And now he was asking Belle to do the same, to take something born in sin and turn it into something good. Make this town whole again. Belle drove back to the motel as the sun was coming up. She climbed into bed next to Nora and held her daughter close and thought about what she was going to do. At 9 in the morning, she called Arnold. "I want to hold a press conference," she said. Arnold was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'm done being silent. I'm done letting other people tell my story. I want to tell it myself." The press conference was held on the courthouse steps 2 days later. Arnold had tried to talk her out of it. The lawsuit with Brennan was ongoing. Anything she said could be used against her. It was better to stay quiet. But Belle was done staying quiet. She stood at a microphone on a gray October afternoon with Nora beside her, and 200 reporters in front of her and cameras from every major news outlet in Pennsylvania. She wore a simple blue dress. She had borrowed it from Jude. It was the nicest thing she owned. She looked out at the cameras and the reporters and the crowd that had gathered, and she took a deep breath. "My name is Belle Hargrove," she said. "I'm 31 years old. I'm a waitress at Millie's Diner. I'm a single mother to a 7-year-old daughter. 4 months ago, my ex-husband left me with $9,000 in medical debt and $83 in my checking account. We were living in a motel. We were 1 bad month away from being homeless." She paused. "6 weeks ago, I bought an abandoned textile mill at a county auction for $150. I bought it because I was desperate, because I needed something that was mine, something nobody could take from me. When I went into that building, I found a note from the previous owner, Henry Whitman. He told me to look where the river ran beneath. So I did. And I found gold. 217 bars, worth approximately $282 million. The crowd murmured. Cameras flashed. Belle continued. That gold was stolen in 1973 by a man named Gerald Morrison. Morrison was one of 4 thieves who robbed the Federal Reserve. He went to prison. When he was released, dying of cancer, he gave that gold to his oldest friend, Henry Whitman. Henry hid it, not for himself, for his nephew, for Theodore Whitman, for the future. I found Henry's journal. I found his letters. I understand now what he was trying to do. He was trying to give his friend's last mistake a chance at redemption." Belle looked directly at the cameras. "I am not keeping this gold for myself. I want to be very clear about that. 10%, $28 million is going to Theodore Whitman. That is his uncle's wish, and I am honoring it. Another 10%, $28 million is going to establish the Henry Whitman Community Foundation. That foundation will help families in Lancaster County facing eviction, medical debt, and poverty. It will help people like me, people who are 1 bad month away from losing everything. The Whitman Mill itself will be restored. It will become a community center. Affordable housing, job training programs, free childcare, everything this town needs and has not had since the mill closed in 1978. The remaining funds will be placed in trust for my daughter, not so she can be rich, so she can be safe, so she can go to college, so she never has to live in a motel again. Belle's voice caught. She steadied herself. "I'm not doing this to become wealthy," she said. "I'm doing it because Henry Whitman asked whoever found his gold to make this town whole again. And I'm gonna try. People have asked me if I knew the gold was there when I bought the property. The answer is no. I had $83. I bought a crumbling building. I got lucky. But luck is not what matters here. What matters is what you do with it. I could have sold that gold quietly. I could have kept it all. Nobody would have known. But I have a daughter. And I want her to grow up knowing that when her mother found something extraordinary, her mother chose to share it. That when her mother was given more than she ever imagined having, her mother chose to lift others up. That's the legacy I want to leave. Not wealth. Character." Belle looked down at Nora. Nora looked back at her with those enormous brown eyes. "That's all I have to say. Thank you." The reporters erupted with questions. Belle ignored them. She took Nora's hand and walked back into the courthouse with Arnold beside her. Behind her, she could hear the cameras clicking, the voices shouting, the beginning of something she could not yet see the shape of. But she had done it. She had told her story, on her terms, and whatever came next, she would face it standing up. The knock came at 2 a.m. Belle had not been sleeping. She had not slept properly in 3 days, not since the press conference, not since watching her brother's face on the security footage from the Delaware vault, not since making the hardest phone call of her life. She sat up in the motel bed, listened. Another knock. Soft. Hesitant. Belle got up carefully, trying not to wake Nora. She looked through the peephole. Callum stood in the yellow light of the motel walkway. He looked smaller than she remembered. Older. His shoulders hunched forward like a man expecting to be hit. Belle opened the door. They looked at each other for a long moment. Neither spoke. Then Callum held out an envelope, large, manila, the kind lawyers use. She took it, opened it. Inside a cashier's check, $2,600,000. Belle looked up at her brother. His eyes were red. "I couldn't do it," Callum said. His voice was rough. "I was at the airport, had a ticket to the Cayman Islands, was gonna disappear, start over. But I kept seeing Mom." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I kept seeing Mom in that rented room," he continued. "All her things in garbage bags. You and me sorting through them. And I kept thinking Belle would never. Belle would burn it all down before she'd run." Belle's throat closed. "I don't deserve forgiveness," Callum said. "I know that. I stole from you. From Nora. From everyone you're trying to help. I betrayed everything we were raised to be." He looked down at his hands. "But I couldn't get on that plane. I couldn't be the person who runs. So I'm here. The money's back. All of it. And if you need to call the police, I understand. I'll take whatever's coming." Belle stood in the doorway holding the envelope and looking at her brother and feeling 1,000 things at once. Rage, relief, grief, love. "Come inside," she said finally. They sat at the small motel table. The same table where Belle had made instant coffee and read Henry Whitman's notes 6 weeks ago. The same table where she had tried to make sense of finding gold in a basement. Callum put his head in his hands. "I almost destroyed this," he said. "I almost destroyed you." Belle looked at him, at the brother who had driven through a snowstorm to sit with her when Daniel left. The brother who had co-signed a lease when no one else would. The brother who had called her out of her mind for buying the mill and had been trying to protect her the only way he knew how. "You came back," Belle said quietly. "That's what matters." Callum looked up. "How can you say that? How can you forgive this because you're my brother? Because you've caught me 100 times before. Because everyone deserves a second chance when they're brave enough to take it." She slid the envelope back across the table. "But this is the only one you get, Cal. You understand me. You ever do anything like this again, you and I are done. Not as siblings. Not as friends. Done." Callum nodded. He was crying now. "I understand." Belle stood up, walked around the table, put her hand on her brother's shoulder. "We're okay," she said. "We're going to be okay." The lawsuit from Richard Brennan was dismissed 3 weeks later. Belle sat in Arnold's office and listened as he explained the judge's ruling. Brennan had failed to demonstrate any legitimate prior claim to the property. His argument that Belle had insider knowledge was unsupported by evidence. His claim that the auction was improperly conducted was contradicted by county records. The judge had been clear. Belle Hargrove purchased the property in good faith at a public auction. What she found within that property was legally hers. Brennan could appeal. Probably would. But Arnold thought the appeal would fail too. "It's over," Arnold said. "The gold is yours." Belle nodded. She felt numb. She had been braced for a fight, had been preparing for months of legal battles, and now it was just done. "There's something else," Arnold said. "Richard Brennan called my office this morning. He wants to meet with you. Privately." Belle looked up. Why, he wouldn't say, but he said it was important. They met at a coffee shop on the edge of Lancaster, neutral territory. Belle arrived first and took a table by the window, watched the parking lot. Richard Brennan arrived 10 minutes later. He was older than she expected, 52 according to Arnold's research, but he looked 60. Gray hair, tired eyes. He wore a suit that was expensive, but had been worn too many times without cleaning. He sat down across from Belle without asking, ordered a black coffee from the waitress, said nothing until it arrived. Then he looked at Belle and said, "My brother died in that mill." Belle went still. Michael Brennan continued. "He was 19. I was 26. It was 1977. The mill was closing. Everyone knew it was closing. But they were trying to keep it open a few more months. Make it to Christmas. Michael was working the sewing floor. A machine jammed. He tried to fix it. The safety wasn't engaged properly. It caught his arm and pulled him in." Brennan stopped, looked down at his coffee. "He bled out before the ambulance arrived. He died on that floor." Belle felt something twist in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I've been trying to buy that building for 20 years," Brennan said. "Every time it went up for sale. Every time the county put it on the block. I wanted to tear it down, erase it, make it disappear. I thought if the building was gone, maybe I could stop seeing my brother's face every time I drove past it." He looked up at Belle. "You ruined that plan." Belle met his eyes. "I did." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I watched your press conference. Heard what you said about restoring the mill, making it a community center, putting names on a wall." He paused. "Would you really put Michael's name there? A kid who died trying to save jobs that were already lost." "Yes," Belle said. "Every person who gave their life to that building deserves to be remembered. Your brother included." Brennan looked out the window, at the parking lot, at the gray Pennsylvania afternoon. "I'm withdrawing the lawsuit," he said. "Finally. My lawyer thinks I'm insane. But I'm doing it anyway." "Why?" "Because you're right. Destroying the mill won't bring Michael back. It'll just erase him. But if you restore it, if you put his name on that wall, then he mattered. What he did mattered." Brennan turned back to Belle. "I'm a builder," he said. "It's what I do. What my father did. What Michael would have done if he'd lived. Let me help. Let me be part of restoring that place. No payment. Just let me finish what my brother started." Belle looked at this man who had sued her, who had hired an investigator to follow her, who had leaked her story to the press, and she saw someone who had been carrying grief for 47 years and did not know how to put it down. "Deal," she said. They shook hands across the table. Belle moved out of the Riverbend Motel on a Saturday in early November, 1 year and 4 months after she had bought the mill. The yellow house sat at the end of a quiet street in Oak Creek Meadows, a small development on the edge of paradise. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a fenced backyard, a small front porch with space for a swing. Belle had paid $385,000 cash. The realtor had looked at her like she was lying. Single mothers who worked at diners did not pay cash for houses. But Belle was not that person anymore. Not exactly. She was still a waitress. She had kept her job at Millie's, working 3 shifts a week. But she was also the founder of the Henry Whitman Community Foundation. She was the owner of a building that was about to become something extraordinary. She was a woman with a daughter and a future that looked nothing like the past. Moving day was chaos. Callum and his wife Elaine came down from Redding with a rental truck. Jude Patterson helped pack boxes and fussed over Nora and cried 3 separate times when she thought no one was looking. Everything Belle and Nora owned fit in one truckload. Clothes, books, Nora's toys, the small television, a few kitchen items, not much else. They had lived light for so long that accumulating possessions had never been an option. But today was different. Today they were moving into permanence. Belle stood in the empty living room of the yellow house with Nora beside her and looked around at the clean walls and the hardwood floors and the windows that let in so much light. She knelt down so she was eye level with her daughter. "This is ours," baby, Belle said. "Nobody can make us leave. Nobody can raise the rent. This is home." Nora looked around the room with wide eyes. For real, real. Nora threw her arms around Belle's neck and held on tight. Belle held her daughter and felt something inside her chest finally settle. That night, after the boxes were unpacked and Callum and Elaine had driven back to Reading and Jude had gone home, Belle and Nora sat on the floor of Nora's new bedroom and looked at paint samples. "I want purple," Nora said. "You said I could pick any color." Any color, Belle confirmed. Dark purple or light purple. Nora considered this with the seriousness of someone making a life-altering decision. Light purple. Like lavender. Like flowers. Belle smiled. Lavender it is. They painted the room together the next weekend. Belle bought good paint, the kind that covered in one coat and didn't smell toxic. They taped off the trim carefully. Nora helped with the roller, standing on a step stool, concentrating so hard her tongue stuck out. When they finished, they sat on the drop cloth in the middle of the room and looked at their work. "It's perfect," Nora said. "You're perfect," Belle replied. Nora leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Mama, yeah, baby. Are we different now?" Belle thought about this. Thought about the motel. About the diner. About all the nights she had lain awake wondering how she was gonna pay for Nora's next prescription. "We have more," Belle said carefully. "But we're the same people. Money doesn't make you better. It makes you safer. It means we have choices we didn't have before. But it doesn't change who we are in here." She tapped Nora's chest right over her heart. Nora nodded. "That's good. I don't want to be different. I just want to be safe." Belle pulled her daughter close. "You are safe, baby. I promise. You are so safe." Jude Patterson's house was 2 blocks away from Belle's new place. A coincidence? Or maybe not. Belle had looked at 7 houses before she found the yellow one, and when the realtor mentioned that the neighborhood was quiet and family-friendly and had a lot of retirees, Belle had asked to see it immediately. Jude lived in a small ranch that she and her late husband, Everett, had bought in 1989. Everett had died 6 years ago. Heart attack. Quick and merciful. Jude always said, though, Belle suspected it had been neither. The house had a mortgage. $92,000 remaining. Jude paid $480 a month. It was manageable on her Social Security barely, but it meant she could not afford to fix the roof when it started leaking last winter. Could not afford to replace the water heater when it failed in the spring. Could not afford the new car she desperately needed when her old Buick finally gave up in August. Belle came to visit on a Tuesday afternoon, brought coffee and cookies from the bakery on Main Street. They sat at Jude's kitchen table, the same Formica table Jude had bought at Sears 30 years ago. "Jude," Belle said, "I need to talk to you about something." Jude looked at her over her coffee. "If you're about to tell me you're moving away, I'll never forgive you." Belle smiled. "I'm not moving. I'm staying. But I want to do something for you. And I need you to let me." Jude's eyes narrowed. "Belle Hargrove, what are you planning?" Belle pulled an envelope from her purse, set it on the table. Inside were 3 things. A cashier's check for $92,000. A receipt showing that Belle had already paid for a new roof, a new water heater, and a complete HVAC system for Jude's house. And a statement from a bank showing an account in Jude's name with a balance of $500,000. Jude opened the envelope. looked at the contents, looked at Belle. "No," she said. "Yes. Belle, I can't accept this." "You can. You will. This is too much. It's not enough. Jude, you fed my daughter for 4 months. You watched her when I couldn't afford childcare. You left food on my doorstep when I was too proud to ask for help. You stood in front of news cameras and told them to leave us alone." Belle leaned forward. "You can never repay kindness like that. But I can try. Please, let me." Jude was crying now, quiet tears running down her lined face. "Belle, honey, I didn't do those things so you'd pay me back. I know. That's why I'm doing it. Because you didn't ask. Because you just did what needed doing." Jude looked down at the check, at the bank statement, at the receipt for home repairs. "There's one condition," Belle said. Jude looked up. "Sunday dinners. Forever. You, me, Nora. Every week. No exceptions." Jude laughed through her tears. "That's not a condition, honey. That's a blessing." They hugged across the Formica table, and Belle thought about all the women in her life who had held her up. Her mother, flawed but fierce. Jude, who had shown her what quiet generosity looked like. And Nora, who was learning to be both. Callum and Elaine received their check 2 weeks later. $2 million in a trust fund structured so they could access the interest but not the principal. Enough to live comfortably. Not enough to be stupid with. Belle drove to Reading to deliver it in person. Callum opened the door, saw her standing there, saw the envelope in her hand. He knew what it was. "Belle," he said, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. After everything I did, after everything you've done for me. Cal, you've been catching me since I was 5 years old. You drove through a snowstorm when Daniel left. You co-signed my apartment. You told me I was out of my mind to buy the mill, but you gave me the lawyer's name anyway." Belle handed him the envelope. "You made a mistake. You came back. That means something." Callum opened it, looked at the trust documents, at the dollar amount. He sat down on his front steps. Belle sat down beside him. They sat there together in the November cold, brother and sister, and watched the gray Pennsylvania afternoon turn to evening. "I don't deserve this," Callum said finally. "None of us deserve anything," Belle replied. "We just do our best with what we're given. And you're my brother. This is what family does." Callum wiped his eyes. "What am I supposed to do with $2 million? Whatever you want. Quit the warehouse. Go back to school. Take Elaine on the honeymoon you never had. Just be happy, Cal. That's all I want. For you to finally be happy." Theodore Whitman flew to Pennsylvania in early December. Belle picked him up at the airport. She had never met him in person, only spoken on the phone, and she was nervous in a way she had not expected. But when Theo came through the arrivals gate, she recognized him immediately from the photographs. Thin, white hair, wire-rimmed glasses. 74 years old and carrying a single small suitcase. He saw her holding the sign with his name. Walked over. Looked at her with eyes that were kind and tired and grateful. "Miss Hargrove," he said. Mr. Whitman." They shook hands. Then Theo pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me back my uncle." Belle drove him to the mill. It was late afternoon, the winter sun already low. The building looked different than it had a year ago. The parking lot had been cleared, the fence repaired. Scaffolding covered half the exterior where restoration work had begun. They went inside. The main floor was gutted now down to the brick and steel, but you could see what it would become. The high ceilings, the tall windows no longer boarded, light pouring in. Theo walked slowly through the space, ran his hand along the brick walls. "I was here once," he said, "when I was 8. Uncle Henry brought me. Let me watch the workers. There were hundreds of people here. The sound of the machines, the smell of fabric and machine oil. It was like a city inside a building." He stopped at one of the iron columns, looked up. "Uncle Henry told me that everything he built for people, not for profit. For people. He said that was the only thing worth building for." Belle stood beside him. "We're going to honor that. This whole building. It's for people." She showed him the plans, the architect's drawings, ground floor for workshops, trade training, sewing, woodworking, culinary arts, second and third floors for affordable housing, 32 apartments, priority for single parents, elderly working families, fourth floor for community space, library, childcare, meeting rooms. Theo looked at the drawings for a long time. He would have loved this, he said finally. Uncle Henry. This is exactly what he would have wanted. Belle took Theo upstairs, to the small room on the fourth floor where Henry had lived, where he had died. The room had been left mostly as it was, cleaned but not changed. The narrow bed, the nightstand, the window looking out over the parking lot. Theo stood in the doorway, did not enter. "I tried to visit him," he said quietly. "In '83. I was teaching in Philadelphia. I wrote him a letter, asked if I could come see him. The letter came back marked, 'Occupant deceased.' I thought I was too late. I thought he died alone, thinking I didn't care." "He did die alone," Belle said, gently. "But he didn't think you didn't care. He knew you cared. He was waiting for you to come home." "How do you know?" "Because he left the gold for you. Because he wrote in his journal about you. Because everything he did in those last years he did hoping you'd find it someday." Theo walked into the room then, sat on the edge of the bed where his uncle had slept. Belle sat beside him. They sat there in the quiet and the fading light, and Belle told Theo everything she had not told him on the phone. About finding the journal. About reading Henry's entries. About the letter she had discovered, the final letter. The one that said, "Make this town whole again." When she finished, Theo was crying. "I wish I had known him better," he said. "I wish I had come back sooner." "You're back now," Belle said. "That's what matters." The groundbreaking ceremony happened on a cold Saturday in January, 1 year and 2 months after Belle had bought the mill. 300 people came, residents of Paradise and Lancaster, workers from the old mill, those who were still alive, their children, their grandchildren, reporters, cameras, news vans, but also neighbors, friends, Jude Patterson and her quilting circle, Millie from the diner with her entire staff, Callum and Elaine with their kids, and Nora, 8 years old now, standing beside her mother in a purple coat that matched her bedroom walls. Belle stood at a microphone on a temporary stage, Theo beside her, Arnold on her other side. Behind them, the brick face of the mill with its tall windows and its crooked sign. "Thank you all for coming," Belle said. "A year ago, I stood in the rain outside this fence and wondered what I had done. I had bought a building for $150. I had $83 left in my bank account. I had a daughter and a dream I couldn't name." She paused, looked at the crowd. "This building has been empty for 46 years. It's been falling apart, rotting. People called it an eyesore, a hazard, something that should be torn down. But I saw something different. I saw bones, good bones. I saw history. I saw 200 families who made their living here. I saw a town that lost something when this place closed and never got it back." Belle looked at Theo. "Henry Whitman built this mill in 1928. He ran it until 1978. 50 years. He employed 200 people, paid fair wages, took care of his community. And when the mill closed, when the industry moved overseas and there was nothing he could do to stop it, he felt like he had failed. But he didn't fail. He built something that mattered. He built something that endured. And when his oldest friend came to him dying and desperate, Henry did what good men do. He protected him. He gave him dignity in death. And he hid something precious, hoping it would someday help someone who needed it. I needed it. My daughter needed it. This town needed it." Belle looked out at the crowd. "Today we break ground on the Whitman Community Center. This building will house 32 families. It will train hundreds of people in trades. It will provide free child care for working parents. It will be a library and a meeting place and a home. But most of all, it will be a memorial to Henry Whitman, to Gerald Morrison, to every person who worked in this building when it was a mill, to everyone who gave their labor and their lives to making things in America." She gestured to the wall behind her. "We're putting 200 names on that wall. Every worker from 1928 to 1978, including Michael Brennan, who died here trying to save jobs, including my grandfather, who worked in a mill like this one and lost everything when it closed. They will be remembered. Their work will be remembered. This building will make sure of it." The applause was long and loud. Belle stepped back. Theo stepped forward. Belle handed him a shovel. "This is yours," she said quietly. "Your uncle's dream. You should be the one to start it." Theo took the shovel, walked to the place where a ribbon marked the ground, pushed the shovel into the cold earth. The crowd cheered. Construction took 18 months. Belle visited the site every week, sometimes with Nora, sometimes alone. She walked through the gutted interior and watched walls go up and systems get installed, and something impossible slowly become real. Richard Brennan's company did the structural work, pro bono. Rick himself came to the site most days, worked alongside his crews. He was quiet, serious. But Belle saw him once standing in the main floor lobby looking up at the space where the memorial wall would be. He saw her watching, nodded, said nothing, but she understood. This was his penance, his way back to his brother. Nora turned 9 during construction. She asked if she could help design the children's library on the 4th floor. Belle said yes. Nora made drawings, picked colors, chose books from lists the librarian provided. She named the child care center Clover's Corner after her stuffed rabbit. At the opening months later, when reporters asked Nora what it felt like to have a whole room named after her toy, Nora said very seriously, "It's not named after my toy. It's named after every kid who needs a safe place. Clover kept me safe when we lived in the motel. Now this place will keep other kids safe." The reporter wrote it down word for word. The memorial wall was installed in June. 200 names, engraved in black granite. Alphabetical order, each name with the years they worked. At the top, a dedication. In memory of every person who labored in this building when it was Whitman and Sons Textile Company, 1928 to 1978. Your work built this community. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Below that, 2 photographs. Henry Whitman and Gerald Morrison, young men standing together by the ocean. The caption read, "Friends, brothers, protectors of the future." And at the bottom, a special plaque, Michael Brennan, 1958 to 1977. He gave his life for this work. Rick Brennan stood in front of that plaque on opening day and cried like a child. Belle stood beside him, put her hand on his shoulder, said nothing. Some griefs are too big for words. The Whitman Community Center opened its doors on a Saturday in August. 2 years after Belle had bought the property, the apartments were full. 32 families had moved in over the summer. Single mothers, elderly couples, young people starting out, veterans, immigrants. The workshops on the ground floor were booked solid. Trade training programs, sewing, woodworking, culinary arts. 50 students enrolled in the first session. The library on the 4th floor held 10,000 books. The child care center had a waiting list of 40 families. And on opening day, 2,000 people came to celebrate. Belle stood in the main lobby and watched them come through the doors. Watched children run across the polished concrete floors. Watched elderly residents find the benches by the windows. Watched young people sign up for classes. Theo found her there, put his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he said. "You made my uncle's dream real." "We did it," Belle corrected. "All of us." 5 years later, Belle stood in the same lobby and looked around at what had been built. The Whitman Community Center was thriving. Over 900 families had lived in the apartments. Over 2,000 people had been trained in the workshops. The library circulated 50,000 books a year. Clover's Corner provided childcare for 120 children. The Henry Whitman Community Foundation, separate from the center, had helped 847 families avoid eviction, had paid off medical debt for over 300 people, had provided legal assistance and emergency funds and job placement services. The foundation's endowment had grown to $165 million through careful investment. Belle was 36 now. She had finished her business degree online. She ran the foundation full-time. She still lived in the yellow house with Nora, who was now 13 and wanted to be an architect. Belle had remarried. A quiet man named James who taught history at the high school and treated Nora like she was his own. They had been married 2 years. It was good, steady, nothing like the chaos with Daniel. Theo had moved back to Pennsylvania, age 79 now. He lived in one of the apartments on the top floor of the center. Taught history workshops twice a week, mentored students, told stories about his uncle. Callum had gone back to school, had graduated with a degree in accounting, now worked as the foundation's financial officer. He had been sober from his mistake for 5 years, had earned his way back into Belle's trust one day at a time. Jude was 73, still hosting Sunday dinners, still leaving plates of food on doorsteps when she thought someone needed them. Still the heart of the neighborhood. And Nora. Nora was thriving. 13 years old, smart, kind, unafraid. She volunteered at Clover's Corner every Saturday. She had never forgotten what it felt like to need help. Belle was in the lobby on a quiet Sunday afternoon when Nora found her. "Mom," Nora said, "can I ask you something always?" They walked up to the 4th floor, to the memorial wall, stood in front of it together. Nora looked at the 200 names, at the photographs of Henry and Gerald. "Do you ever think about that day?" Nora asked, finding the gold Belle smiled. "Every day. Do you wish it never happened?" Belle turned to look at her daughter, at this extraordinary person she had somehow been trusted to raise. "No, baby. I wish I'd found it sooner, so I could have helped more people." Nora nodded. "That's what I thought you'd say. Why do you ask?" "Because kids at school sometimes ask me what it's like, having a mom who found all that money, and I never know what to say." Belle knelt down. Nora was almost as tall as her now, but Belle still liked to be eye level when they talked about important things. "Tell them this," Belle said. "Tell them my mom didn't find money. She found a test. And the test was, what kind of person are you when you have more than you ever dreamed? Do you hoard it or share it? Do you build walls or bridges, and what did she do?" Nora asked, even though she knew the answer. "She built bridges," Belle said. "We built bridges together. You and me." Nora hugged her mother. "I'm proud of you, Mama." Belle held her daughter close. "I'm proud of us, baby." They walked back down together, through the building that had been broken and was now whole, past the apartments full of families, past the workshops full of students learning trades, past Clover's Corner where children played safely while their parents worked. At the main entrance, Belle stopped, looked back. The late afternoon sun poured through the tall windows, the same windows Nora had told her to restore 5 years ago. Let the sun in her 7-year-old daughter had said. And Belle had listened. She thought about Henry Whitman living alone in that small room on the 4th floor, guarding a secret he hoped would someday help someone. She thought about Gerald Morrison dying of cancer, asking his oldest friend one final question. Do I deserve to die with nothing? She thought about Theo spending 4 years paying $60 a month toward a debt he would never clear, thinking his uncle had forgotten him. She thought about Callum standing in an airport with a ticket to the Cayman Islands choosing to come back. She thought about Jude leaving plates of food on doorsteps, expecting nothing in return. She thought about every person who had touched this story and made it what it was. And she thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, standing in the rain outside a chain-link fence with $83 in her checking account and a daughter who needed her and a dream she couldn't name. That woman had bought a building for $150. That woman had found gold in a basement. That woman had chosen to share it, and in doing so had become someone worth being. Belle took Nora's hand. They walked out into the August evening together. The parking lot was no longer cracked and overgrown. The fence was straight and strong. The sign above the entrance read, Whitman Community Center, in clean letters that would last another 100 years. Behind them, the building stood solid. 4 stories of red brick, windows glowing with light, full of life and purpose and possibility. A home for everyone who needed one. Belle looked up at those windows, at the light pouring out, at the people visible inside living their lives, building their futures. Mama Nora said, "What are you thinking about?" Belle smiled. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are. Lucky that we got to be part of this. Lucky that we were given something extraordinary and we didn't waste it." "We didn't waste it," Nora agreed. "We built something." "Yes, baby. We built something." They walked to the car. The evening was warm. Summer in Pennsylvania. The kind of evening that feels endless. Belle drove home through streets she knew now. Past Jude's house with its new roof and its garden full of vegetables. Past Millie's diner where she still worked 1 shift a week because Millie asked her to, and Belle couldn't say no to the woman who had been kind when kindness mattered. Past the county courthouse where she had stood at a microphone and told her story. Past the motel where she had lived for 4 months and promised her daughter they would be okay. They pulled into the driveway of the yellow house. The magnolia tree in the front yard was blooming. The porch swing moved gently in the breeze. Home. Inside, James was making dinner. Something with pasta. The kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes and safety. Belle stood in the doorway and watched her husband cook, and her daughter set the table, and felt something she had not felt in so long she had almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. That night after Nora was asleep and James was reading in the living room, Belle went up to the attic. She had a box up there. Things she had saved from the motel. Not much, but enough. She pulled it down, opened it. Inside the original envelope from the county clerk. The one with Henry Whitman's note. "To the brave soul who claims this property, look where the river ran beneath. What I hid belongs to no one but the finder now. Do not let it go to waste." Belle held the note in her hands and read it one more time. Then she pulled out a notebook, the same one she had started keeping the week she found the gold. She opened it to a fresh page, dated it, and she wrote, "Dear Nora, when you read this someday, know this. The treasure wasn't what I found in that basement. The treasure was what I built with it, what we built together. Your great-grandmother died with nothing. Your grandmother died with nothing. But you, my love, will inherit something. Not money. Something better. The knowledge that your mother was given more than she ever imagined and chose to lift others up with it. The knowledge that wealth is a tool and character is the hand that wields it. This building, this foundation, this life we've built, it's all for you. Not to make you rich, to show you what's possible when you choose courage over fear, when you choose generosity over greed, when you choose to build instead of hoard. I bought a broken building for $150. I bet on us when no one else would. And we won, baby. We won because we were brave enough to share what we found. Remember this when I'm gone. Remember that the bravest thing you can do is bet on yourself. And then when you win, reach back and pull others up with you. I love you always. Build something good and good. Your mother, Belle. She closed the notebook, put it back in the box, carried the box downstairs. In the morning, she would take it to the center, put it in the archives with Henry's journal and Gerald's letters and all the other documents that told this story. But tonight, she just stood in her kitchen with the box in her hands and looked around at the life she had built. The house was quiet, safe, full of light. Outside, the magnolia tree bloomed. And somewhere in Lancaster, in 32 apartments in a restored textile mill, families were settling in for the night. Children were being tucked into bed. Dreams were being dreamed. All because a woman with $83 had been brave enough to buy a broken building. All because she had found gold and chosen to share it. All because she had understood what Henry Whitman had understood, that the only thing worth building is something that outlasts you. Belle turned off the kitchen light, went upstairs, kissed her daughter's forehead, climbed into bed beside her husband, and slept the sleep of someone who has done what they set out to do. The building stands today. 4 stories of red brick on the edge of Paradise, Pennsylvania. Windows full of light. A sign that reads Whitman Community Center. Inside the memorial wall lists 200 names. People who worked and sacrificed and built something that mattered. At the top, 2 photographs. 2 young men by the ocean. Friends. Brothers. Bound by something stronger than law. And in the archives, in a climate-controlled room, there is a box. Inside that box, a note written in elegant cursive. To the brave soul who claims this property, look where the river ran beneath. What I hid belongs to no one but the finder now. Do not let it go to waste. And beside it, a newer note, written in different handwriting. I didn't waste it. I built something good. Thank you for the chance. The story of the Whitman gold became legend. Articles were written, documentaries filmed, books published. But the real story was simpler. A woman found treasure, and she chose to build bridges. That's all. That's everything.